Burmese pythons have devastated native wildlife in the Everglades.
Deep in Florida's vast, suffocating swamps, an unseen war rages, its battlefields echoing not with gunfire, but with a terrifying, growing silence. For decades, the headlines have screamed about the invasion, the complete, unyielding takeover by giant pythons that turned a vibrant ecosystem into their personal hunting ground. But recent, chilling footage isn't just showing an aftermath, it's revealing something far more sinister. A hidden consequence that nobody, not even the most seasoned biologists, saw coming. It's a biological twist straight out of a horror movie, a desperate Hail Mary gamble by humanity that the entire world mocked, and a shocking revelation that the pythons are still here, yes, but they are no longer the only monster stalking this broken paradise. What's truly been unearthed in the Everglades isn't just an apocalypse, it's a multi-layered nightmare. An unexpected twist that rewrites everything we thought we knew about Florida's great, fatal mistake. Long before this chaos, before the whispers of a coming doom, the Florida Everglades was a living, breathing miracle. A staggering, vibrant tapestry of life. This wasn't just a swamp, forget that word. It was a vast, slow-moving river of grass stretching over 1.5 million acres, a unique subtropical wilderness so rich, so complex, that its value was estimated at over $31.5 billion every single year. Imagine that, a single ecosystem worth billions, not just for its beauty, but for its raw, essential services. It wasn't just home to alligators and exotic birds, it was the natural filtration system, providing flood protection and clean drinking water for millions of people in bustling South Florida. Life here moved in a perfect, delicate, almost choreographed balance. Huge flocks of wading birds, herons, great egrets, roseate spoonbills, and white ibis would literally cover the sky, so numerous they looked like shifting clouds, a sight that now feels like a ghost from another time. Raccoons, opossums, marsh rabbits, and even tiny deer known as key deer scurried through the sawgrass. Bobcats and native foxes patrolled the edges of the tree islands, these elevated havens called hammocks, each a miniature world of its own. It was one of the last truly wild places in North America, a bastion of nature untouched, and nobody, not even the most seasoned experts, imagined it could unravel so fast, transforming from a miracle into a mausoleum. This whole nightmare didn't start with a bang, a sudden cataclysmic event. No, it began with a whisper, then a hurricane. In August of 1992, Hurricane Andrew, a monstrous Category 5 storm, slammed into southern Florida with a ferocity rarely seen. The winds were screaming at over 165 miles per hour, flattening entire neighborhoods, leaving behind a trail of unimaginable destruction. And in the terrifying chaos, it tore apart a reptile breeding facility near Miami. When the winds finally died down, an unknown but undoubtedly significant number of Burmese pythons, a species native to the steamy, dense jungles of Southeast Asia, had slipped away, vanishing into the flooded, shattered wetlands. But here's the crucial, darker detail. That storm, as devastating as it was, wasn't the only problem. At the exact same time, a slower, far more insidious disaster was unfolding, fueled by human ignorance and desire. Throughout the 80s and 90s, Burmese pythons were the ultimate hot new exotic pet. People flocked to buy them, seeing them as cool, edgy, a symbol of their daring. They'd pay $10 for a tiny, coiled snake that fit in the palm of their hand. But here's the insidious catch. Those cool snakes don't stay small. They grow, and they grow fast. A snake that fits in your hand in a year becomes a 10-foot, 50-pound monster, and they don't stop. They can easily exceed 20 feet in length and weigh over 200 pounds, heavy enough, strong enough to take down a full-grown deer, an alligator, or even, God forbid, a human. Overwhelmed pet owners, now stuck with a giant, dangerous, and increasingly expensive predator, did the only thing their panicked minds could conjure. They drove to the edge of the Everglades, to its vast, seemingly endless expanse, and just let them go. They thought they were setting them free, giving them a new life. Instead, they were lighting a fuse on an ecological time bomb.
an act of unwitting betrayal against the very land they claimed to love. And here's a wilder, more disturbing thought. What if the pet owner story is just the convenient, easy excuse we tell ourselves? What if the hurricane didn't just break a facility, but the facility? A massive, perhaps undocumented breeding operation that flooded the swamp with thousands of snakes all at once, not just a few scattered pet releases over time. Some researchers, in hushed tones, whispered that the sheer speed and scale of the invasion, the geometric progression of their population, doesn't add up with just a few escaped pets. It's a mystery that to this day has never been truly, definitively solved. For years, nobody paid much attention. A few sightings here and there were dismissed as curiosities, isolated incidents, but the pythons weren't just surviving. They were thriving beyond imagination. You see, the Everglades wasn't just a place for them. It was a perfect storm of opportunity, a python's paradise meticulously crafted by nature herself. The oppressive heat, the suffocating humidity, the endless shallow water that provided cover, and crucially, an all-you-can-eat buffet of native animals. Animals that in their entire evolutionary history had faced zero natural defenses against a predator like this. The Burmese python is a marvel of biological engineering, a perfect killing machine. They are masters of camouflage, vanishing in the sawgrass like a phantom. They can hold their breath underwater for over 30 minutes, allowing them to ambush unsuspecting prey from below. And the craziest part, the thing that haunts the nightmares of biologists, is that they possess thermal sensing pits along their jaws. They can literally see the body heat of a warm-blooded mammal in total darkness. A raccoon doesn't stand a chance. A marsh rabbit is simply a meal ticket. And then there's the breeding. Oh, the breeding. A single female can lay a clutch of up to 100 eggs in one go. With no natural predators to keep them in check, with no jaguars or large constrictors from their native Asia to regulate them, their population went vertical, an unchecked explosion. Today, experts estimate there are anywhere from 100,000 to over 300,000 pythons slithering silently, invisibly through South Florida. And the paradise that once was bursting with life is now falling silent, a quiet, horrifying testament to their dominion. The numbers are so devastating, so statistically improbable, they sound fake, like something pulled from a doomsday movie script. A landmark study from 2012 revealed the horrifying truth. In the hardest-hit areas of the Everglades, raccoon populations have dropped by a staggering 99.3%. Opossums are down by 98.9%, and bobcats, once common sights, have fallen by 87.5%. Think about that. Not 10%, not 50%, but 99% gone, erased from the landscape, as if they never existed. What most people don't realize is what this truly feels like. Biologists, park rangers, and veteran hunters who have worked in the Everglades for decades talk about the profound, haunting silence. They remember driving down the loop roads, having to stop for raccoons, for turtles, for deer. Now they see nothing. For miles, for days. The small mammals that formed the entire foundation of the food web have been vacuumed up, devoured, leaving behind an ecological void. The invaders had found heaven, and they were consuming it whole. The delicate balance that held the Everglades together for thousands of years wasn't just broken, it was shattered into a million pieces. And as officials finally woke up to the magnitude of the crisis, they realized they weren't just fighting a visible enemy. They were fighting a ghost. The swamp was silent, yes, but the pythons hadn't come alone.
As the silence in the Everglades became deafening, an undeniable, chilling testament to the python's victory, the state of Florida finally had to act. But their response, at first, looked less like a coordinated scientific effort and more like something ripped straight from a cheap reality TV show, a desperate public relations stunt. In 2013, officials launched the Florida Python Challenge. It was part publicity grab, part desperate lottery ticket, an admission of complete failure. They invited the public, basically anyone brave enough or crazy enough to wade into the swamp, to hunt the giant invaders. They offered meager cash prizes, including a $10,000 grand prize for the person who removed the most snakes. It became an annual spectacle, a media circus. By 2024, over 800 people from all over the country and even from Canada showed up, armed with traps, snake hooks, and nerves of steel, ready to do what decades of policy and professional intervention couldn't. That year, they managed to capture 195 Burmese pythons. The headlines were great, the photos were dramatic, showing smiling hunters with giant snakes slung over their shoulders. It felt like a victory. But here's the brutal truth, the cold, hard math. They removed 195 snakes. A year later, in 2025, they broke a new record, 294 snakes. This sounds huge, right? Like progress? Yeah, about that. Let's be generous and take the lowest possible estimate, 100,000 pythons in the wild. Removing 294 of them is less than 0.3% of the population. If the real number is closer to 300,000, the impact is statistically zero. It's like trying to empty the vast Atlantic Ocean with a single teaspoon while the tide is violently rushing in. The Everglades wasn't healing, it was just a backdrop for a glorified hunting competition. The pythons were outbreeding the bullets, outbreeding the traps, outbreeding every human effort by orders of magnitude. So the state got more serious. They brought in the professionals. The South Florida Water Management District hired 24 elite paid hunters. These weren't weekend adventurers, these were career python chasers, paid an hourly wage, stalking the levees and swamps day and night, year-round, truly dedicating their lives to this thankless task. Since 2017, these contractors, along with other state, federal, and private efforts, have removed over 23,000 pythons from the wild. It sounds impressive. It is impressive, a monumental testament to human dedication. But even that massive number, the result of years of painstaking, dangerous work, is likely less than 5% of the total population. For every one snake they find, 20 more hatch, hidden and safe, camouflaged in the endless sawgrass. Frustrated, at wit's end, Florida turned to high-tech warfare, believing technology could solve what brute force could not. If they couldn't find them on the ground, they'd find them from the air. They launched sophisticated drones, equipped with high-resolution thermal cameras, thinking they could spot the snake's heat signatures from above. But there was a fundamental problem. The Everglades is hot. The ground is hot, the water is hot, and pythons are cold-blooded. They are masters at regulating their body temperature to perfectly match their surroundings. To a thermal camera, a resting python looks just like a warm rock, a sun-baked patch of mud, or a decomposing log. Plus, the thick canopy of trees and mangroves made spotting anything almost impossible. The drones were a bust, an expensive failure. Then they tried robot rabbits, miniature mechanical decoys designed by engineers that gave off heat and made enticing sounds, hoping to lure the pythons into an ambush. It failed spectacularly. Pythons are ambush predators. They wait perfectly still for real prey to cross their path. They weren't interested in noisy, clunky robots that smelled of metal and wires. The most successful-sounding idea, the one that offered a glimmer of hope, involved using scout snakes, also called Judas snakes. This one was clever, elegant in its simplicity. Researchers would capture a large male python, surgically implant a tiny radio transmitter, and then release it right back into the wild during mating season. The male, driven by the primal urge of instinct, would in theory lead them directly to giant egg-filled females, the very heart of the breeding problem. This program has worked, leading to the removal of some of the biggest, most reproductively active females. But it's incredibly slow, incredibly expensive, a game of inches in a war that needs miles. And here's the wildest theory of all, a chilling whisper among the very people on the front lines. What if the snakes are just too smart? The hunters and biologists who are out there every day, slogging through the muck, they talk about it, the uncanny awareness of the snakes. They seem to know where the traps are. They avoid the levees where the hunters walk.
The Judas snakes sometimes lead researchers on bizarre month-long circular chases, almost as if they know they're being followed, almost as if they are actively trying to deceive their human trackers. Is it possible that an apex predator, introduced to a new environment with no threats, can evolve a new kind of intelligence, a new level of cunning, a terrifying adaptation born of survival? It's a truly terrifying thought. The tech was failing, the hunters were outmatched, the frustration was palpable, thick in the humid air. Years of effort, millions, if not billions of dollars in funding, and an endless list of failed experiments, all pointed to the same sobering, undeniable truth. The pythons had won. Scientists began to admit it publicly, their voices heavy with defeat. Full eradication is impossible, they declared. The best anyone can do is control them. These silent, slithering predators had claimed the Everglades as their own, and no amount of human technology, human willpower, or human desperation could take it back. But the real enemy, the truly insidious one, wasn't the giant constrictor they could see. It was something microscopic, something nobody even knew existed. The enemy within. This is where the story and the real aftermath takes a dark, unexpected turn, twisting from an ecological disaster into a biological horror. What if Florida's biggest problem wasn't the 20-foot python everyone was hunting, but something microscopic, an invisible killer that nobody even knew existed? Deep in the Everglades, a silent, unseen passenger arrived with the invaders, a twisted, parasitic gift from the pythons, and it's now rewriting Florida's ecological story in the most gruesome, terrifying way imaginable. Its name is Raelietula orientalis. It's better known, more chillingly, as the snake lungworm. Scientists first stumbled onto this horrifying threat during necropsies, autopsies for animals, of native Florida snakes. They were finding native species like garter snakes, pygmy rattlesnakes, and water snakes that were emaciated, weak, struggling desperately to breathe. When they opened them up, what they found was a horror show, a visceral nightmare. Their lungs and airways were clogged not with mucus or disease, but with dozens, sometimes hundreds, of tiny, wriggling, blood-gorged worms. They quickly traced the source. This lungworm originally comes from Asia, the native home of the Burmese python. Over thousands of years, the pythons and this parasite co-evolved, developing a macabre truce. The pythons can carry the lungworm, but it rarely causes them serious harm. They're used to it. Their bodies have defenses. But Florida's native snakes, they have zero natural defense. It's a brand new alien enemy, a biological weapon unleashed. And here's the truly terrifying deal on how this new plague spreads. Its life cycle, a model of parasitic efficiency. 1. An infected python poops in the swamp. 2. Those droppings contain the lungworm's eggs, millions of them. 3. Cockroaches and other insects scavenging the swamp floor feed on the waste, and the eggs hatch inside them. 4. Lizards and frogs, key parts of the native food web, eat those infected insects. 5. Finally, a native Florida snake eats that infected frog or lizard. Once inside the native snake's body, the larvae begin their gruesome journey. They don't stay in the stomach. They tunnel through the stomach wall and migrate directly into the lungs. There, they grow. They feed on blood and tissue. They reproduce, laying more eggs. They clog the native snake's airways, suffocating them from the inside out until it simply can't breathe anymore. For many native snakes, this infection is a brutal, slow-motion ending. They become too weak to hunt. They slowly starve, all while suffering from agonizing, debilitating pneumonia. Researchers have found native snakes with severe pneumonia, open bleeding lesions in their lungs, and in some of the worst cases, dozens of these worms literally crawling out of their mouths as they gasped for their last desperate breath. This is the real, unexpected aftermath.
The pythons were the first wave, the visible monster that ended the mammals. This parasite is the second wave, the invisible microscopic killer, and it's here to end the native reptiles, to complete the annihilation.
The real shock came when scientists discovered how far the lungworm had already spread. It's not just in the Everglades anymore. At least 18 different native snake species in Florida have already been found to be infected. The parasite's reach now stretches through dozens of counties, some reports indicating it's as far north as Jacksonville and even creeping toward the Panhandle. And get this is the part that has scientists truly terrified. The pythons may have started this, but the lungworm doesn't need them anymore. It has successfully jumped ship. It has established itself in native hosts and is now spreading all on its own, moving from native snake to native snake, creating an independent, self-sustaining plague. So, here's the truly crazy, terrifying part. Even if, by some miraculous intervention, every single Burmese python was removed from Florida tomorrow, the lungworm would remain. It is here, it is alive, and it is thriving, deeply embedded in the native ecosystem. When native snakes, a key part of the food web, begin to vanish en masse, the balance collapses all over again. Rodents and other pests, once kept in check, multiply uncontrollably. Larger predators that eat snakes, like hawks, eagles, and even larger mammals, lose their crucial food source. Now, here's where the wild theories, the truly disturbing what-ifs come in. First, is this parasite mutating? It already made the incredible, unprecedented jump from an Asian host to dozens of North American hosts. What's to stop it from jumping again? This leads to the scariest question of all. Could it jump to mammals, or even, God forbid, humans? Researchers say it's highly unlikely, that the chances are infinitesimally small. But here's the catch, the chilling precedent. They didn't think it could jump from pythons to native garter snakes either, but it did. What happens if a stray dog eats an infected frog? What happens to a hunter who handles an infected snake? Right now, they say we're safe, but in a world where this microscopic thing is adapting, evolving by the minute, safe is a very strong, very fragile word. There is, however, one very strange, almost miraculous twist in this biological horror story. The Florida cottonmouth, a native pit viper, seems to be highly resistant to the parasite. No one knows why. Is it something in their genetics, their diet? This mystery has sparked its own wild theory. What if the cottonmouth is the key? What if its blood holds the secret to an anti-parasite, a cure for this invisible scourge? What began as a battle against a giant visible monster has transformed into a war against an invisible microscopic one, a threat that is silent, relentless, and utterly without mercy. There is no known cure, there is no treatment, and there is no known way to stop it. An unseen monster was wiping out the survivors, the last remnants of Florida's wild past. Florida was truly out of options. So, in their darkest hour, they turned to a plan so audacious, so seemingly insane, that the entire world laughed out loud. A desperate gamble. With the python invasion spiraling completely out of control, an unstoppable visible enemy devouring the landscape, and a new invisible parasite plague spreading like wildfire through the surviving native species, Florida was beyond desperate. The state was a global punchline, the ecosystem on life support, gasping for its last breath. And that's when officials announced the plan that sent shockwaves of bewildered laughter across the globe. When the news broke, it sounded like a joke, something straight out of a late-night comedy sketch or a Florida Man headline that would go viral for its sheer absurdity. Florida officials announced they were releasing hundreds of more snakes into the wild to help fight the invasive python crisis. The world absolutely lost it. Social media exploded. Doesn't Florida have enough snakes already? Fighting snakes with more snakes? What could possibly go wrong?
The mockery was instant, vicious, and widespread. People immediately compared it to the great ecological blunders of history, cautionary tales etched into the collective memory. They brought up the cane toads, which were released in Australia in the 1930s to control beetles. The toads, famously, ignored the beetles, multiplied into the billions, and became a toxic plague that is still devastating Australia's native wildlife. They brought up the mongooses. In the 1880s, mongooses were brought to Hawaii to control rats in sugarcane fields. But here's the fatal flaw. The rats are nocturnal, and the mongooses are active during the day. They rarely even met. So the mongooses, finding no rats, went looking for other, easier food and ended up wiping out Hawaii's native ground-nesting birds. This, everyone screamed, was the exact same mistake, another case of arrogant humans trying to play God and making things 1,000 times worse. News outlets ran headlines that made it sound like a bad sci-fi movie. Anxious residents wondered if their pets and children were now even more unsafe. To the average person, it felt utterly absurd, a plan doomed to fail before it even began. But here's the crucial counterintuitive truth. This wasn't a Florida man idea hatched on a whim, and this wasn't just any snake. Behind the laughter, behind the snarky headlines, scientists had been quietly, painstakingly working for decades on a desperate, brilliant plan, a deeply researched strategy forged in laboratories and remote field stations. The snake they were releasing was the eastern indigo snake, and it wasn't an invader. It was the rightful king, returning to reclaim his throne, a native apex predator making its glorious comeback. The eastern indigo is known, rightly so, as the emperor of the forest, and for good reason. It is the longest native snake in all of North America, a powerful, non-venomous predator that can grow up to a majestic 9 feet long. Its scales are a stunning, iridescent blue-black that shimmer in the sun, a patch of reddish-orange coral color underneath its chin, a living jewel. But its sheer beauty isn't what makes it special, what makes it perfect for this desperate mission. Its diet is what makes it a legend, what makes it perfect for this desperate mission. The indigo is what's known as an ophiophagus. That means it eats other snakes. And get this, it is completely immune to the venom of North America's most dangerous pit vipers. Rattlesnakes, cottonmouths, copperheads, the indigo eats them all, treating them like a casual snack. It doesn't constrict its prey, it simply pins them down with its powerful jaws and swallows them alive, completely unshaken, unfazed by the struggle. It is, quite literally, the undisputed boss of the forest floor, the ultimate snake hunter. Its kingdom, however, used to be vast, stretching from South Carolina through Georgia and Florida and west to Mississippi. But that kingdom crumbled not due to invaders, but due to human actions. The indigo snake's fate is tragically tied to 2 things: longleaf pine forests and gopher tortoises. First, the forests. The indigo snake thrived in the ancient longleaf pine ecosystem, a majestic habitat that once covered nearly 90 million acres of the American Southeast. Today, because of rampant logging, unchecked development, and aggressive fire suppression that altered the landscape, nearly 97% of that original, irreplaceable forest is gone. Second, the tortoise. The eastern indigo snake doesn't dig its own burrows. It relies almost entirely on the deep, sandy burrows dug by the gopher tortoise. These burrows are like underground apartment complexes, offering vital shelter from fire, cold, and predators. Over 350 other species depend on these burrows. The gopher tortoise is what's called a keystone species. The entire ecosystem is built around it. As the longleaf pines were cut down and the tortoises were hunted for food or displaced by development, the indigo snake simply vanished. During the Great Depression, people dug up tortoises for food and would dispatch any snakes they found hiding inside. By 1978, the eastern indigo snake was listed as a threatened species, completely wiped out from Alabama and North Florida, a lost king in his own land. So, here's the truth behind the seemingly laughable plan.
It wasn't about adding a new snake to a broken system. It was about painstakingly, carefully restoring a native apex predator that humans had already tragically wiped out. For decades, a dedicated coalition of conservation groups and state agencies had been meticulously breeding indigos in captivity, nurturing them back to health. They were simultaneously restoring vast patches of longleaf pine forest and diligently protecting and expanding gopher tortoise populations. What looked like an impulsive, crazy idea to the public was in fact one of the most careful, slowest, and scientifically backed restoration projects ever attempted. But that doesn't mean the wild theories, the public's fears, are entirely unfounded. What if this is the mongoose scenario all over again? What if we're releasing a new apex predator into a system that is already completely, irrevocably broken? What will the indigos eat after they eat the pythons, if they even can successfully hunt them? What if they become the new plague, the next unintended consequence? Scientists swear they've done the research, that
the ecological conditions are different. But here's the haunting echo. That's what they said in Hawaii, too. The emperor was back. The stage was set for a battle of titans. But the real shock, the true, unexpected aftermath, was happening somewhere else entirely. The three-way war. While the world was busy laughing at the absurd snake versus snake plan, something else, something truly extraordinary was happening in the swamp. Something nobody expected, a testament to nature's ultimate unyielding resilience. This was the other unexpected aftermath. The quiet miracle amidst the chaos. Deep in the Big Cypress National Preserve, a vast wilderness adjacent to the Everglades, researchers were meticulously tracking a colossal 13-foot, 52-pound male python they had named Loki. The snake was fitted with a GPS tracker as part of a crucial breeding study, its movements diligently monitored. One December morning, they went to check on his location, expecting a routine update, a simple dot on a map. What they found left them utterly speechless, their scientific detachment shattered. Loki's massive body was sprawled in the sawgrass, lifeless. His head had been completely chewed off and was hidden under a nearby bed of pine needles. This was a 52-pound apex predator, a veritable dinosaur of the swamp. What in the Everglades, what on earth could possibly do this? An alligator? A panther? A few days later, a trail camera set up nearby, a silent observer in the wilderness, revealed the unbelievable culprit, the shocking truth that stunned everyone. It was a native bobcat. A bobcat that biologists estimated weighed barely 25 pounds, less than half the weight of the massive python. This discovery stunned everyone. Wildlife experts called it a first, an unprecedented event. A native bobcat had successfully stalked, dispatched, and eaten an adult Burmese python more than twice its size. For 2 decades, these pythons had been the undisputed monsters, feared by everything that moved. Now, suddenly, one of Florida's own, a seemingly outmatched native, had turned the tables, striking a blow for the home team. Some experts guessed that a recent cold snap had slowed the python down, making it vulnerable. But that's where the new wild theories begin. What if it wasn't a fluke? What if the native predators are learning? This wasn't an isolated story. Across Florida, more evidence started to pop up. Alligators, the original, undisputed apex predators of the swamp, were spotted ambushing and consuming smaller pythons with renewed ferocity. Even the elusive and endangered Florida panther, a ghost of the wilderness, has been documented taking on these formidable invaders. What if the predators are communicating, not in words, but through behavior, through observation? What if one bobcat watched another, or learned from a failed hunt, and is now passing that vital knowledge down to its young? What if the home team, after 2 decades of losing, is finally learning the monster's weak spots, its vulnerabilities?
One wildlife biologist famously called it a score for the home team. The Everglades were fighting back. But this adaptation, this slow, agonizing process of natural selection, is painfully, tragically slow. A single bobcat can't undo 2 decades of destruction. For every python taken down by a native predator, thousands more hatch, hidden and safe, ensuring their species' continued dominance. The home team was on the scoreboard, yes, but they were still losing the game, desperately outmatched. And that's what makes the other part of this story so critical, the laughable plan, the return of the emperor. While the native predators were slowly, painstakingly adapting, the human-led effort to bring back the eastern indigo snake was quietly making its own profound mark. For years, conservation teams had been diligently releasing their captive-bred eastern indigo snakes into a protected area in North Florida, the Apalachicola Bluffs and Ravines. This location is hundreds of miles north of the main python invasion, a deliberate choice, but it's the indigo's ancestral home, the heart of its former kingdom. They tagged them, tracked them, and hoped for the best, pouring decades of work and millions of dollars into this painstaking process. Then, in the autumn of 2023, something truly extraordinary happened, a moment that sent ripples of pure joy and scientific validation through the conservation community. Trail cameras at the preserve captured footage that changed everything. The footage showed 2 wild-born hatchlings of the eastern indigo snake. They were the offspring of the previously released adults, a testament to a successful integration. For the first time in nearly half a century, the eastern indigo snake had successfully reproduced in the wild in North Florida. This wasn't just survival anymore, this was revival. When the biologist confirmed that one of the young snakes wasn't tagged, it meant definitive proof. It meant it was born entirely outside of human intervention, a wild snake, pure and free. The indigos weren't just hanging on, they were living, hunting, and raising the next generation in their old habitat, reclaiming their birthright. As 2024 and 2025 rolled on, the story got even better. Teams began spotting more of the snakes. A strong, confident 6-foot male was recorded gliding through the scrub. 19 other snakes from earlier release years were identified, still thriving, still patrolling their territory. The heart of this recovery is the land itself. The slow, hard, often invisible work of restoring the longleaf pine ecosystem and protecting the gopher tortoise burrows had paid off. The ecosystem wasn't just being restored, it was beginning to function again, providing the very foundation for the emperor's return. So here's the thing. Let's talk down to earth, as you're probably wondering if this is all some grand delusion. Does this mean the indigos are going to eat all the pythons? Does this solve the problem? No, of course not. The indigos are being released in North Florida. The python stronghold is hundreds of miles south in the heart of the Everglades. They're not even in the same arena yet. But that's not the point. The real unexpected aftermath, the one nobody saw coming, the one that offers a glimmer of hope in this otherwise dark narrative, is twofold. First, that nature itself, given even the slightest chance, is adapting, learning, and fighting back. The bobcats and alligators are becoming python hunters. Second, that a conservation plan built on patience, on meticulous science, and on trusting nature's own delicate, powerful balance actually worked. For decades, the story of the Everglades was a story of human failure. We failed to keep the snakes contained. We failed to remove them. We looked for a high-tech silver bullet solution, and it blew up spectacularly in our faces. But the real solution, the one that's finally giving a sliver of hope, wasn't a robot or a drone. It was a native snake. It was the slow, hard, often thankless work of restoring the land piece by piece and patiently bringing back the king. The pythons are still a crisis. The lungworm is still a terrifying, invisible plague. But footage from Florida's swamps finally revealed an aftermath nobody expected: resilience, hope. But this is where the final, chilling, wild theory leaves us, the ultimate cliffhanger in this unfolding drama. What happens next? What happens when the Indigo's territory, which is slowly but surely spreading south, finally collides with the python's territory, which is relentlessly spreading north? This isn't just a hypothetical clash, it's an inevitable epic confrontation decades in the making. And more importantly, what happens when the lungworm, that invisible killer that is also spreading north, meets the emperor, meets the newly restored precious indigo snakes? Are we just painstakingly restoring a native species, pouring our heart and soul into its revival, only to feed it to an invisible alien monster that arrived with its enemy? The real aftermath isn't an ending. It's the start of a new three-way war, a multifaceted battle for the soul of the Everglades. The python, the parasite, and the emperor. Are we witnessing a recovery, a desperate last stand for nature, or just the next terrifying phase of the apocalypse? Let us know your theory below, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more stories from the edge of the wild.